We are live.
Live from Jian District in Shanghai and the east side of Toronto for the rest of you. This is our second edition of the Grant Writing and AI Bootcamp information session. I'm Peter Davison. I'm the founder of Coffee Shop, and I'm here with Jesse Clark. Jesse, why don't you introduce yourself?
Jesse Clark, and I'm the founder of Jan Clark Consulting, and this is my cat Katya, who really likes to be part of these presentations. I do government funding and grant writing and funding strategy for charities and nonprofits in Canada, and we're super excited to be here on our second live to talk about our upcoming Grant Writing and AI Bootcamp. Which is really something that I think speaks a lot to people. I keep hearing from people every time I do a training, every time I do a workshop, they're like, well, what do you think about AI? Are you using AI for grant writing? So it's really responding to a question that's out there.
Absolutely. And so Coffee Shop is focused on AI for social good. We are looking at the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals and seeing where AI can have an impact.
Exactly. And I think there's just so much. We know that, I think as we talked about last time, it's here, people are using it, people are trying to figure out how to use it in all kinds of sectors, and definitely in the nonprofit sector. And actually there's been some interesting data that we've looked at this week as well around Blackbaud put out a new report on the status of fundraising in Canada. I think it's called for 2025. Right. And a lot of what they looked at was about tech adoption and how that's impacting people's ability to fundraise, and some really interesting insights coming into that we can touch on this morning as well, or this evening.
And I'm just going to give a shout out. Yesterday, I was at the French Tech Shanghai. This is a community of the French startups, technology companies, clean tech and AI. And I was speaking with the organizer, Sebastian, about what I was doing in the AI space. And when I mentioned grants and grant writing, he had a very visceral reaction. He was like, oh my God, grants. And all these, a lot of these companies are self-funded companies. I want to mention that first. It's very important in this community that whatever they're working on can stand on its own 2 feet. But at the same time, the clean tech companies, the solar companies, they are writing grants. They are looking at the funding mechanisms from the European Union, France, Germany, countries that are actively supporting partnerships. So I think they're when we think of grant writing, we think of typically as a Canadian, I'm thinking of like some of the charities like United Way. I think of like Oxfam Canada, some of the bigger ones, Food Share, but also looking at funding from like the startup side with science and technology credits that can be applied for through grants. The clean tech space especially has a lot of money right now, a lot in the Canadian and European context.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think we're going to be continuing just to see more of that. With the government we have right now, I think that's going to be continue to be a big focus. And I've seen some of those. I think there's even some Canada EU partnerships around grants for different kinds of innovation and tech as well. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff happening in this space. And I think lots of ways that we want to figure out how we can work with AI and make it work for us, and how we can use it as a tool. Because grant writing, is a challenge that goes across a lot of different areas. I know I've been just again in some more conversations this week. I'm going to be doing a course next week on fundraising for an organization here, a 2-day workshop, and grant writing always comes up as a topic of people want to learn more about, and they always want to know about how to use AI with that, because I think people are really understanding. It's a really different environment right now when it comes to fundraising and when it comes to all of this kind of work around social impact space, nonprofits, charities, etc. there's some things that have worked for a long time, and some of them don't work anymore. And I think people are looking for new ways to bring in funding. And I think people, as always, I think some of the perennial challenges that are out there are around like how do you actually, write the grants and design the programs and get the funding when you don't have the funding yet to do that with. um, is like probably the most perennial challenge that I hear from people doing this kind of work. It's like, well, we don't have any money to actually write these things, so how do
Right.
we actually do it? And that's really one of the key things that I think our course is going to give people is a really practical, hands-on focus in terms of tools. These are the prompts, these are the tools, these are the kinds of things you can use. And if you're not a specialist in this, which I know I'm not, and I've only dipped my toes into it a little bit, I think we have no idea of the kinds of resources that are available out there.
And I
In terms
think
of the different tools.
I think this would be a
Yeah.
good time. I think this would be a good time then to that between the conversations that we've been having with people this week at various events and some back channeling on LinkedIn through some of messages. I think you're absolutely right. People want to understand, like, so the first part of this, like we talk about the 4 or 5 pillars that we have with our course. And I think, Jess, we were talking about, one aspect that is a big one is that a lot of people simply don't know that there are grants, like even people that have been in the space for a while
Mm.
cannot catch everything. And there
Yeah.
are grants
Oh,
that,
yeah.
there's nothing more frustrating than, and I have been looking myself just to see what the experience would be like without AI.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
and you end up going to a funder page and seeing May 28th, 2025 is the deadline, and it's June now. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of excellent funding opportunities that are available that are not being surfaced for people to apply for. I mean, excuse me, I should be
Totally.
careful. They are being surfaced, but they're not being surfaced or amplified in the right way to get like visible for everyone, especially
Oh,
for
yeah.
teams, especially for those part-time for people that are doing full-time work on part-time pay. Uh, there's a lot
Exactly.
of those type of situations. So one is the surfacing of the opportunities, I would call them, the grant.
Mhm.
The other, when we think of AI, you mentioned this, and I noticed it yesterday as well, is that language is very important when like the type of funders that you're going to, making sure that you're speaking their language, right? Just a
Yep.
bit of a
Yeah, and
summary
then
from
there's
the
really an
last.
alignment, right? Like it's exactly, because you might have a really good program that does match up, but if you can't show that to them with the right language, then yeah, then you might as well not even bother, right? Which is really frustrating sometimes. But
I think
this is a way where you can really work with that for sure.
I think this is a real this is a pain point. Is that many companies, many founders, especially who believe in their mission. This is really, I guess, now either
Hmm.
you're a founder of a charity, for instance, or a founder of a clean tech or like a social good company. You will go and you will be very excited about a government announcement, about a plan. You a government announcement or a foundation announcement. 50 million for clean tech, or 50 million for gender equity in the workplace.
Hmm.
And you're thinking to
Exactly.
yourself, my organization does this. We do this. And you apply, and you could swear that you have filled out the best grant of your life. You've filled out all those categories. You've expressed what your organization has done, and you've given them the use case, and you've shown them case studies. And there's a complete, at the end of the day, you're declined without. And I forget who was talking about this recently, but it came up, is that you won't know why you were declined in many cases.
Yeah, exactly,
So you have
exactly.
no way to like even defend your position. But
Yeah,
this,
or even if you can, I mean, even if you can get feedback, like it's interesting because I always encourage people to go and ask for feedback if they're not successful. But even when you get feedback, not everybody offers feedback. If you do get feedback, which is great, sometimes it can be kind of, generic, right? Or like it's not necessarily tailored to your specific, your specific application,
Yeah.
or really in enough detail that you can really understand what it is that they're, where you missed the mark, right? And that can be really
And then,
frustrating as well.
and then also around the requirements. So, for instance, what you can use your grant for and what you can't use a grant for. And knowing that there might, in some cases, there isn't, but in other cases, there's certain styles of communication that will, you'll look at a grant and it says that you're not allowed to use this grant for payroll. And you'd be like, well, this isn't any good. This is going to help us. But at the same time, there's language and there's a way to approach it that you eventually could potentially use that money for your organization in a certain way. But it does come down to language. I just wanted to do a quick check-in on, I know we're on LinkedIn and YouTube, and if, love to see and hear where people are dialing in from. We've had people from the UK, Canada, the US on our last call. And we have been reaching out and expanding our network for this boot camp. And please drop any questions in the comments or commentary about your feelings. One shout out last time, I had an email from a woman who was very concerned about the role of grant writers, especially for women grant writers in the space. We weren't able to confirm any, get a hard kind of confirmation where the statistics came from. But I think it was just a general concern about women grant writers.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of anxiety, about new technology, right? I think that's not uncommon, that people think, oh, is this going to replace, this particular role or that particular role, which I think is where, certainly one of the things one of the ways that we've been talking about it, is really that that's not how it's meant to work at all as a replacement. It's just meant to be a tool to be able to increase your impact.
And also,
I mean, obviously we don't know how are gonna use it from like an HR, but I think that in terms of the getting actual quality product, you really need to have, the eyes on it and the interaction with it.
So maybe we can get into it a little bit. So your foundation, I mean, everyone has used, maybe some people have dabbled in AI more than others. Some people have really leaned in on it. You have people that have been able to, you're seeing use cases around consumer insights. You're seeing use cases in research and development. You're seeing it in sales. For the nonprofit sector, we're talking about a few key areas that are really collaborative. They're not taking away from your role. So when we think about the grant, like any other position, I think, and you would be able to speak to this a little stronger than me, but strategy is half the battle when you're writing this proposal. And in many cases, that strategy, if you're a smaller team and not a large organization, it's one or two people that are doing all that work, or one person. Mm-hmm. So you're going to use familiar tools. You're going to use ChatGPT. You're going to use Claude. You're going to use Google Gemini. You're going to use so those are three of the big sort of the LLMs, right? And you're going to use this. And in some cases, it's not like you don't have to be exclusive in your use. Each one of those has its role. And in some cases, you can even, there are examples where you take the information from ChatGPT and you go over to Google Gemini and you say, here's what ChatGPT has written. What are the missing gaps? And for instance, Claude, the language models like Claude is always updating the capabilities. Claude's an interesting one because they're really trying, it's not an endorsement per se, but it's I do know that they're trying to look at the equity lens in AI. They're trying to understand the biases in AI. But the first step is the uh, the research. So there's going to be, when we think about AI for this course, we're going to be looking at how do we prompt to be able to get the research that we need to be able to write our grants, in the different stages of the grant.
Yeah, and that's
And
something I'm
then
really excited about because I've spent, untold hours on that over the years. When you're a grant writer, you have to quickly become an expert, in a brand new area, within a matter of a week or two, sometimes, right? And I mean, sometimes you're building on some knowledge you might have, but you're having to go way more in depth. And anything you can do to get better information faster, and know that you're actually getting to the right information, like that's just invaluable for grant writers.
absolutely. And then, and what you're going to be able to do is that you're really going to be able to lean in on on the creative side of your storytelling, because if you can actually, you can do things. You may be familiar with this in a different way with your grant writing, but with AI, especially with like a ChatGPT or a Claude or Gemini, you can do something which is called back casting. And I had a conversation. Again, I gave my friends a shout out last week as well, but the guys from Frye Studio in Australia, they did a lot of work around this backcasting idea, where you talk about what the future will look like after the grant has been implemented. So you start with this far off, like you start from a year from now, you're painting a picture of, what like, for instance, as an example, let's say you wanted to train, let's have a use case here, like train 12 women in Kenya to be for a middle school reading program, like, so with like teaching assistants. So you paint a picture a year from now using AI about what the world looks like now that these kids have these 12 teacher assistants in their lives. And then you can then use the AI to do a pros and cons analysis, or how realistic is it for this organization to deliver on this program. You can challenge yourself and your own team as to how realistic it is to apply for this grant in the first place, and how realistic, knowing the donor alignment, that sort of flows into the next piece. You can actually have this vision of the program, and then you can ask, all right, which donors in say which organizations in Nairobi are working on the education piece, and which funders are going to be the most appropriate funders, because the AI will actually go and look. If you have a list of organizations that are focused on education in Kenya, the AI will look and see what the priority programs are for you and pull that information, and it will tell you what their priorities are for the next, like, you can even say, what are the, and I'm not picking on, I don't mean to, Kenya is one example, but
it's a good example. Exactly. It works.
But I've been doing this in my own work for some other potential projects. I've been trying to identify, for instance, I asked the AI for a list of countries that are emerging in the AI space, like who like, not just random, like a gut check, who, like, I guess empirically, like who are the countries that are coming up in the AI space. So it gave me a lot of typical countries. But then I asked the question of the AI. I said, tell me a country that would surprise me. Tell me a country that I don't know that is focused on AI. And Rwanda came up.
Oh, yeah.
And I was, personally, I was surprised. It was not on my list of countries that have an AI program, like that have a very heavily focused AI program. Now, yesterday, I was at at this French Tech conference, and one of the keynote speakers talked about AI in La Francophonie, and brought up Rwanda.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have to say Rwanda is becoming they've done some amazing stuff to position themselves in terms of trade, in terms of being a hub.
Yeah.
And it's really, really exciting. But I wasn't aware of that with AI either. But
And
kind of knowing what they've been doing, I'm not too surprised, but I'm really interested to learn more for sure.
and then what you can also do, and I think I do think this is part of the grant writing process, and some of the conversations we've had is that you can then get a benchmark of how much has been spent on the programs that you're pitching. You can get an understanding of
Oh,
what the
interesting.
average amount of money that has been spent, and it will also pull the sources for the numbers, where they're getting the numbers from.
That's
And
amazing.
then so then you can then have a full picture of which, like, of course, you also then have to, depending on how large your organization is, sometimes some of these programs, if it's a large organization, then you also have to gut check your own organization to make sure, like if it's a, you know, some of these larger NGOs are can be siloed sometimes, right? You don't always know what's happening on the
Oh
ground,
yeah,
so you
for
need
sure.
to you can actually use the AI to find out what other parts of your organization are doing. Um, and then it comes down to so then uh, we've we've done some of the research, we've done some donor alignment, we've done
Mm,
understanding
mm,
why the donors or the governments, well, donors is a big umbrella,
hmm.
but why the donors are interested in this, why, like, do they have programs already available? Like, for instance, if you were looking at Rwanda, you know that Rwanda is there's a lot of money going in for AI right now, and they're looking at AI at the civil society level, like seeing how it plugs in. Then you can learn if there's a you'll see what the priorities are for each country. So whether it's healthcare, education, and so that you're not pitching in a vacuum. I think that's really important, right? You're not pitching in a vacuum. And then you have your budget, which obviously you have to justify why your project and what the cost analysis is. And so you can actually ask, you can then use AI to create that story, the budget side, and you can say, you can actually brainstorm. In this case, it would be a brainstorm because in a lot of cases, you already know your numbers, like you know your own internal role. But you can say, like, how many people is it going to take for this program? Who typically would work on this type of program? If
Mm,
you didn't
mm,
know already,
mm.
I'm not trying to dumb it down. Like, obviously, if you're
No,
a
no, no.
senior,
But I think one of the things too, Peter, that you were just mentioning that for me is really powerful because I think when I first kind of dipped my toe into Chat GPT or using some of the really basic tools for the first time, I was like, well, I don't know, where this information is coming from. I need sources. I need to understand in a lot more depth and be able to show that there is real evidence behind this. And that's something that's now much more possible with some of the tools that are out there, right?
yes, and you can also and you can constantly be like trying to reconfirm your position. I've often asked the AI, for instance, like I've gone and double checked some of the information, and I'll ask if is this the latest information that you're able to pull?
Mm, mm.
Is this the latest data that is publicly available, or where did this information come from?
Oh, interesting.
And then you also have something that we did together, that exercise where we took the Carleton University. Nice shout out for Carleton
Yeah.
University.
Yeah,
We
that's great research underway. Yeah, exactly.
go Acadia. No. So
Exactly.
we used the Carleton survey, the grant writer survey, and created the infographic. You can also, if you're able to get a hold of research like PDFs that you're using to help you in your grant stating your case, you can create infographics based on the PDF information that you have, and use and
Which is like
create
so powerful, right? And something
create
that
new content for your pitch.
yeah, 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 which exactly, and using some of the stuff you might, because the number of times too that I've, like, I know, there are incredible people out there doing um comms and design, graphic work inside organizations, but they're also always swamped, and
Yep.
it's also always hard to get their time, if you haven't planned it well in advance, right? And so it's also, it's one of those things too, people trying to do off the side of their desks aren't necessarily doing it well, that can really benefit from having that kind of support.
And I think, no, no, absolutely. And when you think of supports, the other thing that we were discussing, and it takes us into sort of that discussing the impact of your project, sort of post. So we've gone, so the course covers the whole life cycle. Well, if life cycle
Yeah.
is the right, or the whole process. We're going to start by talking about, who you're going to, we're gonna look at your donor, like your donor target list. Let's be real about this, right? You have a donor target list, and we're going to talk about whether, and we're going to challenge you on your assumptions of why those organizations, through using AI, we're going to challenge each other as to why those organizations are the ones that you're applying to for your grants. We're going to understand the donor alignment. We're going to understand, and of course, in the Canadian context, there are, like, every country has certain rules about this, but we need to understand the people in the departments that you're going to be applying to, understand, like, some of their thinking. We then are going to look at the justification, like, well, first of all, who's doing what in what countries. Then we're going to look at the budgets, understanding what, maybe we'll be able to see what has been spent in the past on certain areas and sectors. Then it comes down to this impact story. So the donors are going to be like, where did the money go?
Exactly.
And so we're looking at a couple of things. We can have, and I and I'm still, I mean, we'll be building. This list is very fluid, so I'm just talking high level, but more about I think everyone needs to understand the potential. Not everyone's at the same level, but we really have an opportunity to, I'm not a number, like, I'm a numbers guy in the sense that I've run a business before, but I think for someone that is focused on the writing piece, someone that is trying to understand, like, just trying to win this thing, you're also going to be able to use AI to talk about the risk analysis. You're going to talk about, like, the cost analysis, the breakdown of your budgets, and then can create a workflow. You can use AI to create the backstory of what would be the key. Well, I don't know if you're using the exact same language, but what would be the key performance indicators specific to this project and to this organization? So you can actually, if you don't know them already, AI could potentially pull the performance indicators from a foundation that you're applying to, or from the government.
Yeah, and it's one of the things where, having worked on M&E and results-based management over the years,
Yep.
it's not to say that AI can write necessarily, can write a logic model for you. That's not what we're saying. But what it can do is help you with your brainstorming back and forth, right? And help you kind
Absolutely.
of shape and hone these things, because this might be a process where I've been in rooms where we spent 8 hours of a workshop going through making sure the indicators make sense, making sure they're feasible, but then you also want to make sure that they're checking boxes that the donor needs you to check. And I think that's another area where I can really support. You've done all of that work. Let's make sure that you can get yourself across the finish line with something that really aligns with what they're looking for, right?
So
We're almost at time here, Pete. So I
okay,
thought maybe I should take a minute to share the share my screen. And
absolutely.
just bear with me for a second, because I don't do that
Well,
very often on StreamYard, but I think I can do it.
well, while you're doing that, I just wanted to
Yeah.
say is that we have been very conscious to think of about 3 or 4 different type of people that would benefit from this course and the language that we're using. One is, managing directors have their own set of expectations around grant writing and AI. we have ethical, we have not we have operations teams in some of these charities that are really just looking at the efficiency piece. It's not about, of course, everyone gets anxious when we talk about efficiency, but even for people like Jesse just said, 8 hours in this planning session, where we'll be able to brief the AI like a creative team in that way. And you're going to that's the efficiency piece. There's an ethical piece, an efficiency piece, and then the leadership piece is like, how are we going to amplify our stories in order to win and make a stronger impact? But here's the course.
So, absolutely, yeah. So this is the enrollment page, but then I'll take you down also just to show you. I think by now you know us if you've been watching this video. So I don't need to spend too much time on that, but just to give you an idea of the topics we're going to be covering as well.
That's right.
This is how we've broken it down into.
And if you click on there we go. So that, do you want me to quickly read it up, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. No. Go ahead. Yeah.
So that first one is Introduction to AI and Grant Writing. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or a senior grant writer, we're going to talk. Obviously, we're going to welcome you to the boot camp, understanding the eligibility and competitiveness of your particular sector. We're going to be, setting you all up for success and understanding some of those AI fundamentals, where I talked about just some of those tools at a high level. The next is crafting a compelling story. That's the human and AI. You have, identifying and aligning with funders. Jess has been very precise in her language around this. It's like, if you don't have that alignment, it's not worth it. You'll be wasting time and effort. We're going to talk about the data-driven storytelling, and that's where we can talk about the future impact, previous impacts, and what's happening now. Communicating effectively, and the AI tools for proposal writing, and we'll get into there are some not-for-profit NGO tools that are out there. Thirdly, identifying the grant opportunities with AI. We talked about alignment before, but evaluating the grant fit. That goes back to that real life story of one of the founders I talked to yesterday could have swore he was going to win the grant because it was so aligned, but it wasn't, right? And then measuring impact effectively and integrating feedback with AI. And that can take a number of different tools, and it also can really impact your storytelling, because we can also, you start really getting into the human side and the technology side, the collaboration. And lastly is navigating the future of grant writing, strategic planning for future grants. And that's we said 6 weeks. You're going to get an hour and a half, in some cases, possibly 2, depending on timing and scheduling. That's still being confirmed. We're going to make sure that there are some extras, sidebar, kind of like I wouldn't call them study sessions, but we're going to have some check-ins with you throughout the course. And we're going to make sure that you have a list of the resources. And then you're going to be able to, obviously, we want, it's going to be the type of course. We're going to talk.
Be very practical, right? And hands-on.
It's a very practical course. And I just want to say, but we will still touch on the philosophical side of what it means to be using AI in grant writing and some of the ethics around ethical use in grants.
Yeah, data privacy, some of those considerations, exactly.
And also the bias, around not just confirmation bias, but even equity biases. Also with that DEIJ lens, making sure that we that you're aligning with your values of your organization. So that's it.
All right.
So
I need to wrap up.
The call to action, though, just before we gave them the course, but the call to action is to go and click on that button. I haven't talked. There's
a link in the comments on LinkedIn.
But logistically, you have till July 2nd. We pushed it a little bit. July 2nd for the early bird. We're going to give you a couple extra days. And if you use the LI 250, you're going to save an additional $250. So if you buy before July 2nd, you actually are saving $500 because the price goes up to $1,500 after that. Right?
Yeah, so it's a really good deal, and try and grab it as soon as you can, and certainly before July 2nd. And
And
feel free to
then
DM us if you want more information as well.
And then we really look forward to working with all of you, people, again, across the board, depending whether your organization is focused on government grants, if you're looking at clean tech, social impact, social good. And once again, I'm Peter Davison, founder of a coffee shop focused on AI for social good. And this is Jesse Clark.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. And we'll be in touch.
Bye.